In the last video, we introduced component lifecycle methods. Next, we'll talk about some example use cases of lifecycle methods. If you remember back to our boxes exercise, where we have 32 boxes that change color randomly, if that component were part of a larger application, you would want the set interval to stop after this component gets unmounted. So in order to do that, I've got the constructor here, and this is pretty much the same code we've seen before, where we're going to make 32 boxes, give each one a random color, and then set up a set interval that calls setState and changes one box's color randomly. Now, say this component gets unmounted, we'll want that interval to go away. So we've saved the interval ID to the component instance, and then inside of component will unmount, we'll clear that interval. So this is a use case for using component will unmount. Some sort of cleanup like a set interval where you know you want to stop something from happening when the component unmounts. Now let's talk about component did mount. A common use case for component did mount is to make an AJAX request. Because the component did mount method will only happen once per the life of the component, it makes sense to make your AJAX request here for something like getting all the data for a view. To demonstrate, let's build the following app. This is a fairly simple app that shows all the top stories on Hacker News right now. And we're getting the data by calling the Hacker News API. So I can click on any one of these links and it will take me to the corresponding story, and it also says who posted the story. Let's take a look at what the Hacker News API gives us. So in order to make this work, we'll need two GET requests. First, a GET request to the Hacker News Top Story API, which just gives us a list of story IDs. Once we have that, we'll need to make the following GET request for each ID. So if we were to make the GET request for the first ID, 153000069, it would look like this, and we get back the following results. There are actually more keys in the results than what I'm showing here, but these are the ones we care about. We care who posted the article, the ID of the article, the title, and the link itself. Now let's work on implementing this. In Cloud9, I've set up a new app called Hacker News, and so far it just looks like this. It's just a constructor, a render method, and inside the render method we're just rendering this views, and views only has loading right now, so not much going on yet. The next thing we want to do is implement a component did mount to get our data. And what data do we want to store? Well, we want to store a list of stories in our state. So let's make some default state. Next, we'll use fetch to get the data from the Hacker News API. I'll start by making strings for my URLs that I'll make GET requests to. And this story URL base is not a full URL. It's only the beginning of it. We still need the story ID and then a .json at the end. So we'll add that when we make the request. Now let's start by making a fetch to the top stories URL. We want to add a .then method and convert our result into JSON. .json returns a promise, so we can add a .then to that because of promise chaining. Let's scroll down. Now, if you remember, the result of making this request is an array of IDs, an array of story IDs. So we're going to map over that array and make a new GET request for each array. And now we'll use the store URL base in order to create the full URL. And because we know each one of these requests is going to require us to convert the result to JSON, let's add a .then to this. Since we're using a map here, this .then will return an array of promises. And the next .then, we can use promise chaining to take that array and pass it to a promise.all. Now, once all those promises have been resolved, we'll have our array of stories. Now let's just render a stringified array to prove that we're getting data. And as you can see, we're definitely getting data from the API. Now we just need to convert that data into links. I'll do that by mapping over the stories. Now this if check is important. We only want to map if we have some data for the stories. If there are no stories, we want to keep the loading view there. And that's just good UI. You should always have a loading visible while your AJAX request is happening so that the user sees something. Now we'll just return a paragraph tag with our link inside. So as you can see, we're rendering the link with our URL, the title of the story, and also who posted the story. And lastly, we need to render our views. So let's replace this stringify. Let's see if that works. All right, looks good. We've got all of the URLs and we've got the poster as well. Now it's your turn. Next, you're going to work on an app that uses component did mount to make an AJAX request, and also takes advantage of all of the React features that we've learned so far.